Hi, it's me, Jen, with Tidal Gardens, and I'm here to talk to you guys about quarantining your fish again. We got a great response from our last video, and I wanted to go into a little bit deeper detail this time and set up a step-by-step guide for you. So one of the very most important things is actually having some basic knowledge of the fish that you're getting. And so many people skip that step, and they have fish that are either inappropriate for a reef, inappropriate size for the tank that they have, or just they're disease magnets and people are not prepared. You should know going in, what does the fish eat in the wild? Is it something that you're going to be able to replicate? Because some large angelfish, for instance, all they eat is sponge. That's really hard to do in your tank. Just know a little bit about your fish. If it is disease prone, which diseases and parasites is it prone to? Like the powder tangs, for instance, because of their thinner scales, they're really prone to ick. So if you know that going in, you can have a little bit more knowledge in your arsenal. Step one is going to be choosing healthy fish and having some basic knowledge of that fish. Some of the things to look for when you're looking for a fish, is it eating? I know that's very simple, but sometimes fish are really stressed out and they're not eating right away when they first come in. If they're eating, that's a fantastic sign. Do they have normal swimming patterns? Are they pacing the tank really quickly? Are they just hiding in a corner? Are they being bullied? Just those are some things to watch out for as well, because even bullying in fish can be signs of an unhealthy fish. Look for a pinched belly. If the fish is really thin and it has a pinched belly, when it's at the LFS, chances are they're internal parasites, and if it's not eating, it's going to have a hard time recovering from that if its belly's already pinched. This holds especially true for mandarins. If you buy a skinny mandarin, it's probably not going to end well. How is its breathing? Because that's actually a huge sign for a lot of illnesses. If a fish is really breathing heavily, then that could be one of the first indicators for something bad. And also their eyes. If they have clear eyes, that's a great sign. If there's even a little bit of cloudiness in the eyes, that, again, with the heavy breathing, can go into symptoms of really fatal diseases. All right, so we are going to move on to step 2, which is our shopping list, you guys. And we want to get all of our equipment, all of our meds before we get our fish. You don't want to be waiting on the delivery truck for your medication when your fish is already in the tank for 2 days. That's just bad timing. So you'll want to get just all of your equipment in check, and it's a pretty easy list. It's all very basic stuff. All right, so on our equipment list, one thing that we want to do that actually you do have to think ahead about a little bit is a seeded biosphere, or just a sponge that you have soaking in your sump for a month or so. Something that'll give you a little more stability when you set the tank up. It'll just help so that you don't have to do water changes quite as often, hopefully only weekly instead of every 2 days. Live bacteria is also something that really helps keep the tank stable. Of course, you need a tank and a lid, and for that, some of that depends on the size of the fish that you're getting. Some of it depends on the maintenance that you're able to do and where you can fit a tank. I like to do anything from a 10 to about 50-gallon tank for quarantine, just because then the water changes are easier. You're only doing a very small handful of fish at a time, so you don't want to crowd a tank. Ideally, you just have one fish in one tank that you can keep an eye on. So tank and lid. You're going to get a hang on the back filter, maybe 2 if you need them, just if it's a longer tank. It just helps with the water flow, helps with oxygen. You're going to get small power heads if you need them, again, just for larger tanks, or if you're acclimating fish like an Achilles tang, which actually they do like a lot of flow. You want to have lots of PVC for them to hide in. Just whatever's on sale, honestly. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. 2 to 3 inch tubes tend to be about the best because the fish like to hide in squeezed little spaces. An ammonia alert badge. That is a simple little thing, but it's a great visual aid. It'll tell you if you have even just little traces of ammonia in your tank. And it's a great little product, lasts about a year, super easy. Heater. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, just a heater that's appropriate for the tank size. Because some of this material is cheaper than what we're used to dealing with, you might even want to think about a grounding probe. It's just an easy little piece of equipment that if anything goes wonky, you're not going to be electrocuting your fish. Light, that's optional though. That's really more for us. The ambient lighting in the room is usually enough. I mean, in our apartment, we used to acclimate our fish just on top of our dresser because that was the most convenient place for the tank. And we didn't put a light. It was fine. Fresh salt water, lots of it. Have it ready to do emergency water changes if you need to. Just because if a fish is breathing heavy, you don't want to wait for 45 minutes to make water. Poly pads. I like to use poly pad to act basically like a filter sock in the hang on the back filter. Also, you want to have your own hose and your own net for your quarantine tank, just so that way you're not contaminating the stuff that you use in your display or vice versa if one of your fish does have a disease. Shopping list addition. I forgot to mention carbon and bags to keep the carbon in, because after you run medication, you will be running carbon for about a week or so to pull the meds out before you switch to your next medication. And also thermometer, just again, visual aid so that you can see everything's doing well. You may want to get a couple of different ways to measure temperature because you can get inconsistencies. I like having a thermometer and a temp gun just so that way I can check them against each other. The medication list that you're going to want to get, just some basic little things. I like to use either Prime or Amquel, some type of water conditioner just to help detoxify the ammonia or nitrates if you need to. It's a great Band-Aid. You want to get some Prozipro. That one treats worms, flukes, internal parasites. I also like formalin. That one, if you buy on Amazon, will say formaldehyde on the bottle, but it's formalin. It's a great product. Super gentle. Just hide it and store it very, very well because it is toxic. Copper, there are a couple different types that you can choose from if that's your preferred medication. And Furion 2 is the one that I like to use for bacterial issues. You should be covered. This may be actually one of the easiest saltwater tanks you ever set up, which gets us into step number 3, setting up your tank. And in setting up your tank, just choose a quiet area if you can, somewhere that's not super bright, somewhere that doesn't get a lot of traffic. A bedroom tends to do pretty well, dining room that nobody really goes in, that sort of thing. Remove the carbon from the power filters. You're not going to want that right away because you're going to be adding medication. The only thing I put in the power filters are the sponge or biofilter that we mentioned earlier in the shopping list, and polypad to act like a filter sock and catch any of the big debris. Basically everything that the power filter comes with, just set it aside for now. You don't need that. You're going to install your filter, your heater, your power heads if you're using them, and the ammonia alert badge, thermometer, and grounding probe, again, if you're using it, and just as many PVC pipes as you can fit in the bottom of that tank for them to hide in, just your fresh salt water, add the bacteria just to get it going, bring your tank up to temp, and you can add your fish, cover it, and start your treatment. So now we're going to get into step 4, which is actually treating your fish. I'm going to give you the steps that I like to follow, and then we'll talk about some additional ones as well. I like to go with Prozipro first. That one, again, is internal parasites and worms. And most fish that come in, if they're going to have something, that's pretty much it. And it's a really gentle treatment. So that one is 1 teaspoon per 20 gallons of tank water, and that lasts a full week. If you change water, just replenish however much you took out, but that's about it. And it's just a super simple bath treatment. After I'm done running the Prozipro, I run carbon and the power filter for about a week just to pull everything out. And if you have a UV filter actually on your tank, this is where you could turn that on as well. After you clear that for a week and change some water, I like to run formalin. And with formalin, I feel like I have all of my bases covered because it covers basically all of your external parasites. Anything from ick to velvet, brook, uronema, you're covered. If you're using copper, that really only treats ick and velvet. With formalin, that is a 10-day treatment. And that one, you'll do 5 separate treatments, and you'll do a water change with each of those treatments. So every other day, you're going to be doing a 50% water change, and you'll use 1 milliliter of formalin per 10 gallons of water. Again, store it carefully, use gloves. If you have a ventilated area, great, because it does kind of stink. But again, it's super gentle, it works great. It's my favorite blanket treatment for all of my fish. You could use copper if you wanted to in place, again, for ick and velvet, and that, depending on the brand you're using, is either a 2-week or a 4-week bath. You can find it basically any LFS. Coppers and cupramines and things like that are pretty easy to come by if you're uncomfortable purchasing formaldehyde for any reason. So now that we've covered the treatment schedule, one thing that we're going to be doing the whole entire time is observing your fish. And that's, a lot of it you're looking for the same things that you're looking for when you choose a healthy fish to start. You want to see if their eyes are clear. You want to see if they're breathing normally, they're swimming normally. You want to just make sure that they're not hiding, they're not scratching. You want to see what they're eating and if they have a healthy appetite. You want to see if they're having healthy bowel movements, because that's, again, a good indicator as to whether or not your fish has something funky going on. So a couple of things that are normal behavior that may seem odd in a fish during QT: they will hide a lot. It's normal for them to kind of huddle in the corner or hide like completely curved against the PVC so that they're hard to see. It's a very unnatural environment. Don't let that worry you too much as long as your fish is eating. But sometimes they won't even let you see them eat, so stay back a few feet. If you kind of hide slightly out of view, it can get them a bit more comfortable and they'll come out. And you just inch closer and closer each time until they recognize that you mean food. Eventually they'll come around. Speaking of food, we like to give a variety of foods during quarantine. You can see exactly what they eat, exactly what they don't like, so that you're not polluting your tank. And we feed primarily sustainable aquatics pellets. They're fantastic. Most fish take to them before they'll take to any other type of prepared foods. I like to give a variety of frozen foods as well during quarantine. Mysa shrimp is great because of the protein levels. You can do some angel food preparations with sponge if you're acclimating an angel. You can do spirulina brine is a good one for the finicky eaters for some reason. Also, surprisingly, bloodworms. I've had really good luck getting copper band butterflies to eat bloodworms. You want to add an algae clip if you're acclimating tangs or herbivores of any variety, and give a few different varieties of seaweed as well if you can. Some of the medicated foods, if you need to use, I like Dr. G's frozen foods. They have an antibacterial and an antiparasitic that most fish tend to go after pretty readily. I've had pretty bad luck with the medicated pellets. Most fish, they don't like them. I don't know if it's just something with the smell, I don't know what it is, but they don't tend to like the medicated pellets. Once you're confident that your quarantine procedure is done and you have a healthy fish, it's time to acclimate into your display. And if it's your first fish, that's not a problem. You can just acclimate and put it right in. If you have additional fish already and you're concerned about aggression with your new guy, you can keep lights out for a couple of days if you need to. Sometimes rearranging your rocks can really help. Just messing up territory does enough of a territorial reset. That pretty much does it for our step-by-step quarantine procedure. Hopefully that gives you a bit more confidence, and thank you for watching. I just completely blanked out on anything I'm supposed to say.
Let's say it.
And I think I was staring at myself the whole time anyway. You should be covered. I need to do that one over. Is something that you do have to think a little bit ahead. Oops. I totally didn't mean to giggle on that one.